folks. That's never happened before, and it took me a while to figure out the security features. So anyway, welcome everyone to our Missouri Progressive Action Group monthly meeting. I think you know I am, along with Susan Turk, the co-chair of MOPAG. We normally meet the first Saturday of the month, but we're meeting today on the second Saturday because of the holiday schedule. Our upcoming meetings are posted on mopag.net and on our Facebook page. A recording of today's meeting will be posted in a few days to mopag.net. I have planned a live stream on Facebook as well, and I still may do that. Today we're gonna vary a little bit from our normal agenda in that we're gonna get right to our guest speaker. That will be followed by announcements and some club business that we need to conduct today, including the election of new officers. So I'd like now to introduce Elad Gross. Elad is a civil rights constitutional attorney who has exposed public corruption and worked for government transparency. He has exposed dark money organizations that try to buy Missouri's government. Sometimes they're successful in doing that. He served as Missouri Assistant Attorney General and was a candidate for State Attorney General in 2020, and our organization endorsed him in that race. So we've invited him today to talk. Some of our members wanted to hear him talk about his initiative, Take Back Missouri. So we've invited him today to do just that. Elad Gross, again, welcome. Sorry about the interruptions. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Interruptions are fine. Everybody knows I love interruptions. They're my favorite. So no, thanks for having me. And yes, I very much appreciated the endorsement of this group in the race. Obviously, having seen what happened statewide this last cycle, we have quite a bit to do in Missouri on a whole lot of fronts. And I don't know how many of you have gotten much sleep this week, but that has kind of exacerbated the situation that we're in, and probably highlighted just how crappy of a situation we are in Missouri with respect to leadership. So I have been working on a lot of governmental reform initiatives for a long time now. One of the cases that I've been involved in for now over 2 years with respect to public records and dark money is actually going to Missouri Supreme Court. I'll be arguing against Attorney General Eric Schmidt. Right now we're scheduled for February 3rd. He is representing Governor Mike Parson in a open records request that I filed with all the dark money records from our former governor, Eric Greitens. So everybody you can think of, everybody gets to party. And Josh Hawley actually is a listed witness in that case. So if fortunately I'm able to win at the Missouri Supreme Court, like I did at the Western District Court of Appeals, the first thing that is pending in the lower court is a request for a deposition from Josh Hawley and one for former Governor Eric Greitens. So quite a bit of work to do. Josh Hawley might have a lot more time on his hands soon. We'll find out. But you know, it's just really, so so the organization I wanted to talk about today was kind of what sprang out of the campaign, because we did so much grassroots work all over the state. We were working with different candidates, different groups, and really how could we continue that kind of work past an election, something that's there that is really connecting folks all over the state, and that is making Missouri in a lot of ways more competitive politically, but also more responsive to people. There are a lot of obstacles to that. And, you know, I came from a background where I worked with kids for a long time, and where I saw a lot of violence in St. Louis City and a lot of policies that weren't working and a lot of lack of investment in certain communities over others. And that's what motivated me to run. But what I started seeing in my work was that I became this anti-dark money guy because that our broken government system right now is what is causing all of this other mess. It's causing folks to decide, hey, I'm going to do this for my donors instead of do this for people that I'm actually supposed to represent. It causes somebody like Josh Hawley to decide that he's going to make this absolutely baseless objection, go in front of all of these people, continue doing it despite the fact that people just died all around him, and make this big show to the camera as if that's what matters more than anything else. And it's why we've got an attorney general right now who I talked about sitting on this dark money group, but a dark money group that ended up apparently helping organize this whole thing that happened at the Capitol too. And so the more that you look at where these strings are and where everything is, it keeps coming back to the fact that this government is just not working. It's not responsive to people in our state. It's not responsive to people in a whole lot of other states too. So the model that we're working with right now, it's this organization called Take Back Missouri. It is organized as a PAC. One of the reasons we organized it that way was because I wanted to file something with the Missouri Ethics Commission regularly. I wanted people to see exactly where our fundraising was coming from. I wanted people to see exactly what we're spending money on. And honestly, I wanted to get pretty involved politically too when it was necessary. That's not the major focus of the program. Because there are a lot of groups that are doing that kind of work right now. One of them is the Missouri Democratic Party. It's gone through some restructuring. So hopefully those folks are doing that work, right? MOPAG, look, you all have, this is what you all are doing. Groups like Missouri Faith Voices. We don't want to replicate anything that other folks are already doing. We want to be able to connect people who aren't really all that involved to all of the wonderful work that folks are doing to make sure that we aren't losing anybody. We're bringing more people into the process. But we're also making sure that the process works. Because right now, it's not really doing that. Folks can just get up and say just about whatever they want, and people, they either choose to believe them or not, and that's kind of what we're making our decisions off of, instead of folks who are informed through involvement in the process. So Take Back Missouri right now, there's a website. It's takebackmissouri.com or .org, Take Back Mo for short. Either one will get you there. And there are three major focus areas. The first focus area is support. That is the one where we are looking at groups that already exist, and we find ways to help them. So, for example, I just had a meeting with the Cedar County Democrats. They were very excited to have me come in, even though it was the day of the runoff election in Georgia. So we were actually doing updates while I was talking. It was a good time. And so they had some questions about how can we do better outreach? How can we get the word out to more rural voters? It's a very rural county, for those of you who don't know where Cedar County is. We talked about kind of the things that we can do for them. So if you look at the website, you'll see that there's a list of people who are involved. For those of you who checked out our campaign when it was going, a lot of the same faces, a lot of young people who are there, but we're also there's volunteers who are getting added all the time. So folks right now are volunteering to take some time to hop on a Zoom call or a phone call or whatever works and talk to people who say, hey, here's my issue with this group. How can we do this better? And they're offering expertise right now. We've got folks who are able to do fundraising, give fundraising advice. We're able to do organizing, political advice, grassroots kind of organizing work, advocacy in the Capitol, those sorts of things. So folks can get a whole kind of wide array of people with different expertises talking to them for however long they need. So that's the support bucket. It will also include support for candidates. So we've already been working with several candidates for state rep, which is my favorite, all over the state. And helping them kind of, just start with some of the basics. How do you develop a website? How are you going to do messaging and platform development? How connected are you to these groups in your community? What can you leverage? So really helping, especially first-time candidates, but really anybody who reaches out, we're willing to help them. So support bucket is number one. Second bucket is the one that apparently I've been working on quite a bit and have not gotten much sleep this week over. It is the defend bucket. And so that is defending our values in the state of Missouri. That means taking direct action, whether those are, kind of protest event type things or legal action against folks in government right now, but the idea around all of that work is to keep folks who are currently in government accountable to us. So the work that we're doing on the Sunshine Law, recently there was a story, I don't know if you all saw this, with Missouri's veteran homes. There's a Missouri Veterans Commission. They had a report about all the deaths that were happening in Missouri veterans homes due to the COVID-19 outbreak. And there was a summary that they put out there, but then they presented the full 415-page report. And on the commission, you've got a few elected officials, including Jill Shoup, who recently ran for Congress. She's a state senator. And she is looking at this report. And at the end of the long meeting, she says, we need to release that report to the public. Can you send me a copy of that? And the chairman said, no, you will not be receiving a copy of this, and we will not be publishing this to the public. At which point she started sounding the alarm with different government officials, including the governor, and it got into the Post-Dispatch. The response from the chairman of the Veterans Commission, he said, well, you've got a remedy. If you really want this, go ahead and sue me. And somebody found emails from him where he was telling folks he wasn't going to release the report because he was worried about being personally liable for something. That is not an excuse to not follow Missouri Sunshine Law because you feel like you're going to be personally liable, or you have a lot of assets, as he called them, that could potentially be up for grabs for somebody who's coming after you because you did something wrong. That is not a valid excuse. And so I took him up on that offer, and I sent him a sunshine request with a threat to sue him if he didn't release the records. He promptly resigned and released the report. It was nice to see that the governor and the attorney general helped pressure him to do that too. It would be also nice if they changed their mind for the current lawsuit I'm involved in too, and they want to do that for everybody, but they did that this time. So that some of that work is what's going to be falling under the Take Back Missouri umbrella as well, because I think it makes that work more accessible to folks, more transparent, and allows more people to get involved. And so that's bucket number 2. And then the third bucket, which is my favorite one, is engage. So that is engaging new people in this process. It's going to look a lot like what we do for currently existing groups, where we're helping them with all of these different things, but it's really, a lot of it's going to be more brainstorming at that level because they haven't even started along that path. So it targets 2 types of people in Missouri. The first type of person is somebody who's like, hey, I'm really revved up. I know what the problem is in my community. I really want to fix the problem with my animal shelter, or the coal ash pond that's leaking, or the CAFO that are trying to open down the street. What do I do? And so we sit with them, we talk to them about how can you do that kind of organizing, what kind of work you can do, and then we help them all along the way. They might not be very politically involved at all, but over time, as all of us know on this call, we usually, at some point see how government is involved in all of those different decisions, especially when we talk about local government, especially in Missouri, when we talk about state government and how involved it is in so many parts of our lives. So a lot of that's going to be, kind of eye-opening for some people, but it's a way to also say, look, this is a very local particular issue, and it's one that we can help you work on to make our state better, but also to get you more involved in seeing how civically you can get more involved. And then ideally talking to those folks and sending them to groups like yours and the Missouri Democratic Party and saying, hey, these folks would be really great to ask to run for local office, whether that's a school board or a commission seat or a state representative seat, state senator, statewide, whatever it is. It's a really great way to find folks who have done something, who have now developed good reputations in their community for doing something. And now we're saying, hey, they're running because these are folks who have done something, not just said something, but they've actually done it. And you know that they'll do it for you too. So that's the first group. And the second group are the people who don't do anything. They don't come on calls like this unless they're Zoom bombing or something. They don't really, go to many of these political events. They don't vote maybe. How do you get those people engaged? So right now, actually 2 of my favorites, Freddie and Jess, they're working on some voter registration plans right now for the state. How do we show up to different big events once COVID-19 is under control, and hopefully the vaccines, if we can ever figure out how to give people vaccines again in this country. But once we figure that out again, then we'll be able to have folks at different concerts or state fair events or local fairs, county fairs, different kinds of festivals. But the events that, we were already going to as part of the campaign, which is great because now we have a list of all of them. We're able to go to those again to now do voter registration, to get people engaged, to have fun events around which people want to come to the fun stuff. They might not care about the political stuff so much, but once they're in the door and then you kind of sneak some of that political stuff in front of them too, hopefully you capture some of those folks as well who are like, you know what, this isn't that bad. And wow, I didn't know that about my government, how they're using my money. Yeah, I'd be interested in learning more. Put me on your email list, whatever it might be. So that's what the group overall is doing. Right now, we've got a whole, I was just looking this morning, quite a few responses, hundreds of responses so far for folks around the state who have one idea or another. So we're trying to get through as many of those as possible. So far, I mentioned the Sunshine Law situation. Thankfully, it wasn't another case because I just don't have time for more of those. But thankfully, that was resolved. So that was one cool thing that we've done so far. There's a group in southeast Missouri that is having a lot of trouble with the local county commission being transparent about where CARES Act money went. So we've been working a lot with that group. They feel that a lot of the money was spent on certain businesses that were connected to government officials and not others. That a lot of that money was wasted, that the public was told that they still had money in the bank account when in fact they had spent more than all of it and no one was accounting for that. So that's one example of a citizen who, is pretty, I would not say very liberal, very interested in government transparency and government reform, but also not like, not somebody who's really picked one side or another politically either. So that's somebody new who's been engaged. There's a group in Kansas City that's trying to organize kind of like a lot of groups in their area to come together for a forum, and how can they best do that and then keep those people connected and share resources. So we've talked to them about potentially co-sponsoring some stuff with them. There have been a number of folks in the St. Louis area talking about organizing around different issues, some that may involve what we just saw this week. So some stuff that's pretty rapid response to what we're seeing. Some questions about, I don't know if anybody's following, but the surveillance plane project for St. Louis City, where there's a couple billionaires who now have pulled out apparently, who wanted to fund some kind of surveillance plane to watch everybody in St. Louis all the time. And there's been, just stuff all over the state so far, and a few around CAFOs too, which I think is a very important issue for us to be talking about. So yeah, so there's a lot of work, as you can imagine. I know a lot of people have been talking about how can we organize in Missouri better. I think that's such a good question and such like the right idea of a question to have right now. There's a lot of conversation about what happened in Georgia and whether we can just take what Stacey Abrams did and bring it here. Now, I have been reading Stacey's work for quite some time, and I found her initial white paper that she wrote that developed into what they have in Georgia now. We're a very different state. And demographically, we're very different in terms of where folks are moving. We're very different in terms of ideology. We're quite a bit different too. But there's something that is pretty interesting about Missouri, and I think it's historically true too. We are, in my view at least, a very populist state. Now, some folks are have used that term for their own self-interest, which is the big worry about populism in general, when you get somebody up at the front of it who's saying, I'm here for you, but really they're not. And we're seeing that play out right now. But on the other end of that, there are a lot of folks who rightfully so right now, whatever their political kind of slant is, they see that government is not working for them and hasn't for a long time. And there are a lot of folks who've decided they're not voting anymore. They're checked out. They just don't want to do anything anymore because they feel like, what's the point? And I think that with a long-term perspective on saying, yeah, you're right. Now, how do we fix that? And how can you be a part of fixing that? And I want to hear from you, and I value what you have to say. That's going to be the first time in a long time that folks have come to, especially a lot of groups in Missouri, and said that. And we experienced that obviously for the last couple of years, and then several years before that, and now it's still very true. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for us to do it. I think that we can do it through local issues and local organizing, like I said. We've been at points like this before where one party really dominated Missouri, and then suddenly somebody broke through and they were able to bring that message home to a lot of folks. And I think we have the opportunity to do that. I don't, like when I said, Stacey's plan won't necessarily work here. I think a lot of it will. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from what she did. And I think voter registration is absolutely huge, and the turnout in St. Louis City and Kansas City was just terrible. But I canvassed for our campaign, for other campaigns in St. Louis City and in Kansas City, and I had a lot of folks, especially on the north side in St. Louis City, who said, "No, I don't vote." And I said, "Well, how come?" Because what's the point? While they're sitting in between three vacant buildings, one that's collapsing, and they're eating breakfast before they have to go to their second shift right there. So folks do want to talk about issues, even if they feel like the government hasn't been working for them. And I think if we can get folks involved that way first, we'll be able to get them to the next stage of engagement too. So a lot of work, but yeah, I'm excited to be doing it, and a lot of people who are involved. So right now, instead of having organizers all over the state, we ideally do want to have that, but we have more of a stable of organizers, is what I call them. And so when somebody calls in and says, "Here's my issue," and we do our initial intake, then able to say, "Hey, Freddie, can you take this one? I think they'd be a good match." Or, "Hey, Farheen, they need some graphic design work. Can you help them?" And then, if they're busy, then no, we move on to the next organizer. If they can, then they do it. So it's been working out so far, but we're definitely building just from the ground up right now.
Okay. I imagine some people have some questions.
I hope so.
And yeah, I hope so too. And you can unmute yourself if you want to go ahead and ask, or put something in the chat box. Well, I'll ask the fairly obvious questions, Elad. So you've already coordinated this with Michael Butler in some respect, or planning on doing that. And what about the DLN, the Democratic Legislative Network initiative as well? It seems to me that both of those areas would like to know what's going on there.
Yeah. So I've known Mike for quite a bit of time. I talked to him after he won. We have not had a sit down or a long conversation about it yet. We did start the initiative before all of that started happening. We didn't officially, we started having projects we were working on already. So yeah, I'm hoping we can work with the party. I've talked more extensively with Crystal Quaid, who's also working with HDCC. And then Peter, I just kind of, I bother him whenever I want to. So we do the same thing to each other. But yeah, I think, when I talked to Crystal, that was Crystal's first question. Crystal was like, "Well, we're doing this legislative network thing that we're going to launch soon. Is this different?" I said, "Yeah, I think it is. I think it's the people, you are at a level above where we are in terms of people who are engaged. You have folks who are already they are in with the Democratic Party in Missouri. They want to be that person who's representing the party in their area. And then ideally, those are folks who then go on to run for something like a state representative or whatever it might be. We are at folks where they're a lot of them are sick of the parties, but they might not even know very much about what the Democratic Party in Missouri is doing, what the Republican Party is doing. They just know that there's something wrong.
Right.
And usually they know what that issue is. And it's oh my God, in Johnson County, when the animal shelter was closing, it didn't matter what party you were. A lot of people like dogs and cats. And so they said, "Oh goodness, please, let's get together and figure this out." So, I explained that to her, and her first thought about was, this is a lot of the work that we did when Obama first ran and won in 2008, Organizing for America. And I said, yeah, it's not too different, except, we're not explicitly saying you have to do this for a presidential candidate. We're just saying you're doing this for your local community and for the state. And so she gets it. Ideally, all of those things work. Ideally, our county organizations are working. Ideally, our party is working. Ideally, this legislative network is just like firing on all cylinders. And then we can take people that we find and then put them in, like connect them to those different groups. Unfortunately, around the state right now, there's a lot of issues with democratic organizing and the democratic structure as a whole. And there are a lot of county groups, whether that's a club or a central committee, that feel like they've been unsupported or they feel like they don't have much input. And, there's been a lot of discussions, and I sat through about 20 hours of those on Zoom after this last election. And, we're meeting with a lot of folks. So right now, kind of that support column that we have will always be there. But I think it's more important now than it will be later, because there's a lot of groups that need help immediately that eventually we won't have to help them anymore. Like, the idea is you're now self-sufficient, or the party has become, strong enough to really work with you and to help you through everything. And then we don't have to be there anymore. But until that point gets there, the folks in Hannibal really want to have a plan in place now. And I think it doesn't really hurt for them to think more locally than before they have to then think, how does this interact statewide? I think they can get some more, if they can get buy-in from folks in the area, that I think the party overall will be stronger as a result of that too. Because that's really what we need. We need the party to be an organizing force in Missouri. And, right now at the bottom level of it, where folks are supposed to be doing the most groundwork, there's a lot of lack of direction and a lack of resources. And so that's something that we've been really focused on helping. But yeah, we'd love to work every single group that we could find. We'd love to work with. And that includes, some like the NAACP, ACLU, Missouri Faith Voices, other groups that are doing this great work, St. Louis Action, all over the place. There are these groups that we're not here to take anything away from them. Goodness gracious, there's so much work to do. We're trying to get people connected to them as much as possible and then fill in the gaps wherever they might be.
Well, Diane Caston writes, her favorite thing that you have said and what she quotes often is, action is messaging in itself, right?
That's very true, 100%.
So I have another question. So I'm on Facebook and I see discussion with these PhDs in biochemistry and whatnot, and they've got various data analytical skills, presumably, and they don't know where to go. They know that what side they're on, but they don't know where to go or what to do with it, or how to, how they're, and I'm not always sure where to send them either, right? Mm-hmm. So should I send them over to you?
Send them over to us. We'll find a home for them. Yeah, we will.
That's one place we can send them, certainly.
Correct. Yeah. And the idea is, like, that's kind of the thing, right? The basic thing is where do I go, right? When you first are like, hey, I want to do something, where do I go and what can I do? But I want to do something. And so we want to be that group that then it's easy. It's just a one-stop shop where it's just like, yeah, and then we can refer you out to wherever you need to be. Or if you don't see what it is that you're really passionate about, and we could use that here, then we kind of help you go through all those steps to really formulate that and to get more people on board.
Well, I think it would be very useful if you could be largely that intake point. You're not going to be obviously the only intake point, but because I see that all the time, as I'm sure other people do, and people have skills and anyway, other people, other questions. Don.
Okay. We used to be known as a nation of communities that were really, really good at solving problems locally.
Yeah.
And right now we're a nation of that's fallen subject to mass demagoguery and populism. And there are a lot of people who believe that in great part, this is because we've lost that local cohesion, that local glue connectivity that is a farm system for future leaders.
You got it.
And so, Elad, you've traveled the state, and we are very lucky to have your commitment and your talent at the point of the spear here. But how do we, and this, in many cases, we have to think in a bipartisan way here, okay?
Mm-hmm.
How do we rebuild that core set of core values that make us successful as a diverse nation?
Wow, that's a great question. We could talk about that all day. I think this
We
is
did talk about
John
it
always
last
brings
time.
the good ones. He's not playing around. I think it's so funny because Diane just literally put the action as messaging thing. I think the action is a lot. It's not just messaging. It tells you so much about what your values are. And I mean, we see it every day. When you see somebody who's done some kind of work that you're really just like, wow, that's really cool. Like, I'm so happy that person is doing that. Like, it tells you a lot about what that person stands for and what they believe. Now, you might not know everything they believe from just that, right? Like, you might have somebody, who's done some great work in schools or with kids or in education or something, but you don't know who they voted for president. You have no freaking idea, but you're like, you know what? But what they did, they obviously value, our future and what that means moving forward and how folks can get more involved. There's a lot of communication through that action in particular. I think that's probably why personally, and then through as an organization, we're really focused on that kind of action locally. Because I don't know if we ever really had this, kind of social worky conversation with whiteboards as a country about what our common values should be. I mean, obviously we had the Constitution, we had the Declaration, we went through a war to, have the country, and then we had to go through another war to figure out what this country was going to stand for. And, over time, I think like whenever we look at it, it was always what those actions stood for. And then we could say, look, this is what America is. And so for me, I think you're right. I think the problem has been that folks, it's just like what you and what Steve said, people don't right now, there's not like an obvious point for where we get involved. There's just not. Like, I mean, even for Democratic clubs, for example, in Missouri, you used to have a lot of people who used to come to these things all the time. You know what? Honestly, like I've gone and spent some time with some Republican clubs too. Same thing. Like they're not doing so hot either. I think there's kind of a thought about where do I spend my time? Where is it easy to do that? It's a lot easier right now to just, kind of lose yourself in one of these for a whole long time. And I mean, especially with the pandemic too. I mean, we can't make all the excuses in the world saying it's just a phone, but I mean, it's a lot of it is you kind of fall into a position where, it's a path of least resistance. And we're kind of at a point where we don't really know what to do with all of this technology and how we're using it. And I think we're seeing that play out in a very crazy way right now on Twitter with a president who not only lost his personal Twitter, but we also lost the White House official account from this platform. I mean, we just don't know. Like, we're all kind of figuring it out together. There's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of conversation after. But, I just feel so strongly that when we ask people right now to step up and to own something and to be responsible for where we are going, that is something I think that we have kind of gotten into the mindset of not doing so much, where we haven't really given people a lot of responsibility, especially if they're younger. But I mean, just like people in general, we haven't really said, let's open this process up because now we can. We have all these ways of doing that. And there's a lot of reasons. Some people are scared of doing that. They're worried like, oh, are we going to get somebody who's going to play Guns N' Roses in here? Or are we going to actually have more people? Are we going to lose like what we think this thing is supposed to be if more people come in and we don't really know who they are? But, I feel like the more, we just need a lot more communication between human beings, like real communication, not the type where you can just kind of hide behind a keyboard and type it out, but real life human communication. I will say, having had a lot of that communication and then seen a lot of people try to do the same thing with me in person, it's almost like you're in two different worlds. where I'm talking to like somebody who hates immigrants on the internet and then talking to a guy who hates immigrants at the state fair, who within 20 minutes of talking to me now is like, oh, you know what? I totally agree with everything you've said, but I'm upset because of this. And, you know, I think that we have a lot of that as a result of our kind of isolation in this moment through all of these things that we've built up to bring us together, but really hasn't. There's a lot of pent up something, and people don't know how to release it. They don't know how to see something come to fruition and feel like they've contributed. And so I just feel like we do need strong civic organizations, and it's something that we have gotten away from. And I'm hoping that this is a way that, you know, if somebody feels like, well, you know what, that organization doesn't do it for me because of XYZ, and they can say that, and they can say, oh, here's the group of people who would come in if there was something else. Well, how can we help you do that? Or how can we help you work with that group to do that? So, yeah.
Under the item action is messaging, I posted to the chat. I don't know if people can see it because I don't know how that comes up. Can you see the thing that Diane Caston worked? Did that come through okay?
Probably have to download it.
Oh, you have to download it and then look at it. So that's the food drive that's being organized at the St. Louis County Democrat level. And this particular JPEG that Diane did is for the South County township clubs. And a food drive that I think runs from January 18th through the 22nd. And there's some drop-off location. Pardon?
24th.
To the 24th. And there's some drop-off locations in there. So that is at least one thing that I think is really good. You know, it falls under that idea of, you know, well, don't tell us that you care, you know, show us, right?
Yeah.
So also, Christina Anderson writes, so how are you doing in the rural areas in Missouri?
Yeah. So I've spent a lot of time in rural Missouri, and pre-COVID and now post through Zoom. It's a lot harder. It's a lot harder when it's not in person. The internet's bad. I mean, rural broadband is a serious issue, and that's something that we really need to talk about I mean, there's a lot of reasons why this is happening, and when the only thing you get is radio and a certain channel of radio, I mean, that's what you're going to hear. Rural broadband would be absolutely huge. There are some proposals right now. There's actually been some investment. And it's not enough, not even close to enough. Shamed Dogan, who's a state representative, who he's proposed a marijuana legalization bill that would fund a lot of it. So I think you're going to see a lot more folks talking about funding rural broadband. It is such a big issue, and it would be a huge issue economically too for rural Missouri, because we're seeing a lot of, you know, working remotely, and if you can work remotely there, then all of a sudden you can start smaller businesses. And then there's a lot, you know, I'm a big fan of trying to buy stuff made in America as much as I possibly can. And made in Missouri is great too, if you can find, but there's a lot of folks, I mean, all over the state who are doing that. It would be nice if they had internet to be able to let you all know. So yeah, I think we're struggling. I think we're struggling very much because right now there is a cultural component of all of this. And what I mean by that is that a lot of communities in rural Missouri are dying. They're dying for a lot of ways. The average age is going up because kids aren't moving back. And a lot of that is because there's not much opportunity back home. The folks who are left there don't want to feel left behind, because who the heck wants to when you're in that situation? And so you justify it somehow. And, you know, you see this everywhere, especially where there's poverty, and you justify it. And in your head, you say, well, those people abandoned us, the people who left, because they don't get it. Like, they never really cared about this town. They never really cared about us. And that spills over into our politics. You see that with Republican and Democrat in a very large way in this state, where we've got a rural urban split. And you'll see a lot of folks. It was very surprising for me when I was presenting, or years ago now, but I was presenting somewhere in St. Louis County about, before I was running, about the work I was doing around the state. And, I said, well, somebody asked, like, who has anybody lived in rural Missouri or come from rural Missouri? And 70% of the room raised their hand. And it was a lot of folks who had left their smaller towns and come to St. Louis, not only because there was opportunity here, although obviously that's a very big factor, but because there were disagreements at home with how people were doing this, that, and the other. So now we have segregated ourselves geographically too. And so I think that it's a very big issue. There are Democrats in most places in Missouri. There's somewhere it's going to be very hard to find some, but I think that lends itself to being an opportunity for something like this to come in and say, hey, we're here. Because if you immediately say, hey, we're here, we're Democrats, and we've always been here, everybody knows that's a bunch of crap. No, you haven't. Like, most of you don't show up ever. And when was the last time a Democrat came to this church right below Sedalia? I mean, I don't know. But no one else knew at that meeting either. They had no idea. So I think that if you come and you say, I want to help you, what is your idea? That is a very different conversation than me telling you, I need you to vote for me for this, or I need you to vote for this person for that, or for president, or for whatever else. Because that is not, right now, so many people don't see that as a promise for something for them. They see it as an ask for something else you're extracting from them. And you're not really providing much else. And I'm telling you right now, like, there are folks who just kind of default vote Republicans because they just see stuff on TV or whatever they're getting it from. But they don't like Josh Hawley, for example, was not like, I know he won by a whole lot, but it wasn't like a lot of people were just adoring over him. They were just like, oh, I really don't like Claire. And so I think that there's a very big opportunity in rural Missouri, in all of Missouri, really, to say that if you're actually showing up and doing something, that's a very different conversation than you're just asking me for something else so that you can go enrich yourself wherever you're going to do that. And I'm not going to get anything out of it. So, yeah. So I think there's an opportunity in terms of connecting with rural Missouri. We've been able to connect in a lot of places so far because of the kind of way that we ran the campaign before, which has been really beneficial. And it's something that we've started building those relationships already. So it's not like we're just coming in cold. We've got folks who are there who are able to help out. But any help, always accepted. So you got any ideas, anybody that you know? I mean, some people put me on the phone with like, oh, he's the only Democrat in this town. You need to call him, and then he's going to get his Republican wife to vote for you. I'm like, all right, yeah, go put them on the phone. And so I do that stuff all the time. Happy to do it anytime.
Lucas has a question for you.
Yeah, hi, Elad. My name's Lucas Kuntz. So I work with some national organizations like People's Action and Way to Win. We did a lot of work in Arizona and Georgia to set up the wins this year. I actually brought the founder of Way to Win to St. Louis last week to meet with Laura Granich. And so we are kind of examining the C3, C4 table and a lot of the IPOs, independent political organizations. People don't use that nomenclature. Where do you see your work fitting in with things like Move Mo, Missouri Jobs with Justice, Win, Action St. Louis, all that stuff?
Yeah. I think those organizations that already exist are doing good work. Empower Missouri is another one too. And there's a few, there's quite a few others like all over the state. There's some smaller ones, bigger ones. There's quite a few in Kansas City, especially around kind of like different groups, religious groups kind of getting together and organizing too. That have been doing that historically. So yeah, I think all of those are great, and it's great places for us to funnel other people to. You have to be careful when you're doing a C3. So for those of you who don't know, 501c3s are like those nonprofits that do, all the nice stuff, like Operation Food Search, for example. That's on here. That's one. If you're teaching kids or something else, and then you've got political organizations too. Now those C3 organizations can't really get very involved politically. They can do education work. You just kind of have to be careful legally where folks are, because we didn't want to deal with that. And the easiest way to not deal with that, and since I've been railing against dark money so much, I didn't want to start a dark money organization. I don't like those at all. That's why we did the PAC route. So I'm sure there are going to be some organizations that openly we won't be able to say, hey, like you're all over our website or something else, but we're happy to like funnel people to. And Missouri Jobs with Justice, I think, is great. They actually have some new programming I'm hoping comes out soon about getting some more like local leadership kind of type programming too that we can get people directly into. And then
yeah, so we do a lot of our groups do a lot of deep canvassing too, and we're looking to expand deep canvassing. In
Oh, great.
I don't know if that's something you're looking for.
Yeah, please. Yeah, goodness gracious. We need the more of that, the better. I'm a big
Okay.
proponent of that. Yeah.
Steve?
Susan, yes.
Right. You mentioned Shamed Dogan before and his effort to legalize marijuana, but he's a Republican.
Mhm.
And I wondered why the Democrats haven't taken that up as an issue. And the other thing, and this is, I think, was a missed opportunity when Galloway Nicole was running for governor. I was wondering why she didn't make more of an issue out of the corporate farms, the large feeding organizations that Republicans in Northwest Missouri have been complaining about to their Republican representatives, not either knowing or understanding that their Republican representatives support those farms. And why hasn't the Democrats exploited that issue? It seems like there's a disconnect between what we think are issues and what are issues that will really do us some good if we adopt them.
I 100% agree. It's kind of fun. So this cup came from right around that area. It's a Chillicothe mug. It's home of the first sliced bread. Apparently, they claim that they are the home of sliced bread. They are also the home of a congressman who his name was Jerry Litton, who is a Democrat in the area, extremely popular. He ran in the election for Senate when Danforth was running. He was on the Democratic side, was not very well known, and then all of a sudden just started climbing in the polls like crazy. An extreme, I mean, he used to do, so I don't know, some of you might have watched, I did these podcast things and we were doing that on the campaign, and I had like guests come on. It was like an open town hall type of thing. I thought that was like a new idea. He was doing that on TV during that election and having people just come in, Republicans and Democrats, and they could say whatever they want. He brought in like all these national folks. It was a really like wonderful concept. He died in a plane crash the day that he won the primary, which, obviously changed a whole lot of things in Missouri. But he's, very well known. Like that, like you mentioned that name in Chillicothe for a second, and everybody like just gets like teary eyed and they just think about him or whatever. I 100% agree. I think there's a lot of things in our history that we've kind of forgotten in Missouri, and we haven't really, like, people know, but we haven't really shared that with folks. A lot of folks don't really know the history of the state, and there's a lot of lost lessons as a result of that. You talked about two issues. I totally agree. I think in general, the issue that we have right now is that we are imposing ideas on people instead of asking people what their ideas are and then seeing which ones actually work. Corporate farms is a very, very big issue. Everybody know, like, one of your biggest investment is where you live, your house and all that, for most people. And when you move a pig farm right next door, just down the street, your property value is going to decrease like nothing else. And you're going to be lucky if you can sell that thing to anybody. And so that hits people pretty hard. We saw that happen in the St. Louis area, for those of you from here, when they started talking about education and failing school districts and busing, and people started coming out with all types of terrible rhetoric. But the reason was because folks were freaking out about their home values and all this other stuff. So that is something that we really have to kind of consider, what are the economic impacts on regular people from kind of these conversations. Marijuana, I agree with you. It is actually an issue that has been proposed every single year he's been in there by Peter Meredith. The problem is we don't have enough Democrats to get that across the finish line right now. So when Shamed Dogan, who's a Republican, does it, all of a sudden it's big news, because it's like, wow, some Republicans doing it. He's also I've known Shemed for a long time. He's a pretty moderate guy, and now he's very openly moderate because he's going to be running for county executive, or at least he's exploring that in St. Louis. He's never been a big fan of Donald Trump, but now he's just like, oh, everybody that he's had a problem with, we're all about to know about it. So, I think part of it is that the messaging hasn't been very strong. I think the Republicans can kind of run, some pretty boring, crappy campaigns and get away with it. Democrats can't afford to do that. And we can't afford to be the ones who are kind of seen as sitting back and not standing for much of anything, or at least not standing up for much of anything, or being hypocritical about whatever we're being hypocrites about. There's less margin of error for a Democrat than there is for a Republican in Missouri. And I think we have to realize that. But yeah, I agree. Those are two very important issues. And I think that they are winning issues in Missouri.
Okay, anything else? Any other questions? Do we have any, I don't think we have any state legislators, or do we have any candidates who would like to speak before we turn to other business?
I don't know where Lucas went, but I would think he would want to speak. Oh, there he is.
I'm here. My kids are currently doing National Geographic experiments, so I had to make sure they weren't killing themselves. It's actually close. So, thanks. So I'm looking to take a swing at Roy Blunt in 22.
Trouble hearing you, Lucas.
Let me.
Closer is good.
That's good.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, I think it's because they're hammering, and so it's the mic. I'll just walk. So,
Yeah, my brother did that with me the other day, and it worked when he moved.
Yeah, he just moved. Yeah. I just gotta say though, if one of them dies in the next 10 minutes while I'm up here, you all are on the hook. Okay, so I'll just introduce myself a little bit. See about me. No.
No.
You need to lean in, though. I think you need to be a little closer, maybe, to the mic.
Let's see. Is that any better?
I think
Yes.
so.
Yes.
Okay, we'll do that then. Okay, I can't see you guys anymore. I'll just talk. I'm from Katz City. I was born and raised there. I guess I'll just give you a little background. It kind of gives you my motivation for running. When I was 8 years old, my little sister was born with a bunch of heart problems. She had to have 3 open heart surgeries. My family went bankrupt from that, and the community came together, like brought us food, brought us money, and helped us get through. We got through that. I went to high school. I did really well. I got into Yale.
The audio is terrible.
Yeah, Lucas, we're still having trouble. It actually sounded better when you leaned back a little bit, so I'm not sure what's going on.
You want to go to somebody else and then come back?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, well, I'll just lean back then. I
Okay.
can't even see you, so I don't know what's going on.
Okay.
Okay, what all did you hear and what didn't you hear?
Not much.
Not much. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm from Jeff City. I was born and raised there. My family's been in Missouri for a really long time. And when I was growing up, we were kind of living on the edge for a while. And then my sister was born when I was 8. She had a bunch of heart problems. My parents spent about a year at St. Louis Children's Hospital when she was getting a bunch of surgeries. And we went bankrupt. We kind of lost everything. And the community came together. They brought us food. They brought us money so we could get by and recover. We recovered. I moved on to high school. I did really well. I got into Yale. And then again, I didn't have enough money to go. And again, the community came together and gave me scholarships, like from people I didn't even know. So that made me really motivated to want to pay everybody back. I came back from Yale. I went to Mizzou Law School. And then in 2007, George Bush said that we were going to surge in Iraq. A bunch of my friends from high school had already been. So I decided that maybe that was the best way to pay everybody back. So I took my fancy law degree, I joined the Marine Corps, and then I went to Iraq once and Afghanistan twice. I came back, I did my last tour at the Pentagon. And while I was at the Pentagon, I started to get into fighting corporate power. So I work at a think tank called American Economic Liberties Project, and we ran like the congressional antitrust hearings against Google, Facebook, Apple, and Amazon. We're behind the antitrust lawsuits against Google and Facebook. And while I was there, I got out of the Marine Corps to fight corporate power. And like at the same time, my dad's trying to sell the house we grew up in. Everybody's saying the economy's good. The house is in Jeff City. He can't sell it for 2 years. It finally sells for $40,000. You see the same house in DC that I walk past every day on my way to the Pentagon sell for $900,000. All these businesses have left Missouri. Jobs are gone. Someone said it earlier, we got foreign ownership, a lot of the agriculture, Smithfield, 25% of pork production money now going to China, right? So at our organization, we start to see that Missouri is like actually where the fight against corporate monopoly power is. Roy Blunt is like classic image of corporate monopoly hack, and we want to take the fight to him. I want to take the fight to him. And I think the thing that I find the most frustrating, and one of the things I find the most motivational is like, my old neighborhood's kind of falling apart, right? Like the first house I lived in is now bulldozed into an empty lot. The second one's falling down. The corner store is boarded up. And like these guys have been mismanaging our economy for 20, 25 years. And it just kills me that like out of the ashes of that economy, people like Josh Hawley and Eric Greitens are the ones who are going to be essentially like the phoenixes rising out of that. So what I want to do is, like Elad was talking about populism, I want to bring a true populist message where we actually like fix the system. We break up corporate monopoly power. We make it possible for small businesses to thrive. And we get everybody healthcare so you can start a small business and all those sort of progressive issues. And bring that message to Missouri and see how it plays. So that's my goal.
And your goal is to run against Blunt, I heard?
That's right.
Okay, let everybody know, good and loud.
I will. For sure. I wish I could see you guys, but I can't because this moves mess things up. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them.
I just want to make a remark that dovetails with what you said, Lucas. My wife and I lived in Fairfax County and in Arlington for 25 years.
Yeah.
And we moved to a small town in Illinois, Lebanon, Illinois, in 2004. And we would take these little day jaunts around Southern Illinois. And I have to tell you, I was just shocked at what I saw economically. The small towns where the business had closed years before, and the antique shop that came in to replace the business, and the antique shop was now out of business. I mean, it was
It's all over Missouri too. Like
it was shocking, and I realized what a bubble I had lived in Fairfax County, which I'm sure, well, we all live in bubbles of one type or another, but it was just shocking to me. And because I just had no idea of the economic disparity. I mean, I knew not every county was Fairfax, but I didn't know the extremes. And I would just say it's been going on for more than 25 years, more like 30, 40, 45 years, right, Don?
Yeah, I mean, it started with Milton Friedman and this idea that, profit is everything, and that if you follow profit, then that determines societal good. And what we see, the end result of that is outsourcing, no jobs in America. Like when I was working at the Pentagon, project is not on Facebook. We have our own website on the internet. You can go to it. I'll put a link in the chat box. But yeah, I mean, the end result is we can't make anything anymore here. Like when I was at the Pentagon and we were doing supply chain studies, we are 100% dependent on China for every major weapon system. And the reason we're in that situation is because we have corporate monopoly profiteers converting American risk into profit. And they do the same thing with workers. They convert worker risk into profit. When I was a Marine, you know, we had a monopoly called 3M selling us earplugs that were bad. They knew they were bad, but they had a monopoly, so they just sent them to us anyway. They converted our hearing into their profit. Like, it's terrible. And the real solution is to break them up and have competition, because when you have competition, you're able to go to somebody else when someone fails. When you don't have competition, you have things like Boeing, where they got planes flying out of the sky and the US government is going to bail them out because there's nobody else to go to. So anyway.
Well, one of the things that happens on the in the Missouri legislature is legislators get accused of being not business friendly. So I got rather short-tempered about some of our legislators talking about being accused of not being business friendly. So anyway, other comments?
Well, I grew up in rural America, and I have a lot of Facebook friends there right now. And so you really have a serious infrastructure problem. And, you know, my family was in the telephone business, and there was money available through a federal funding program, Rural Electric Administration, that allowed us to really provide better quality service than the Bell systems, okay? Because we had access to that loan capital, okay? So, you know, we can, if we're smart, we will invest in these rural communities, because by nature of the Constitution as it stands now, they control our lives, okay? Politically. And so there's some smart strategic things we can do to bring that third world, which is essence what it is. And if you go down to Jeff City and you meet with the legislators, you think you're in a different world, okay? So there's things that we can do strategically to bridge that, and I hate to use this word, but I will, this ignorance gap that is fertile ground for all this demagoguery, okay? So just a comment.
Yeah, and well, like the type of loan program you're talking about too. I mean, the Federal Reserve right now is pumping $120 billion into the economy every single month, and they're buying on the SMCCF, the secondary market, corporate bonds from like fossil fuel companies, junk bonds actually, and other large companies like Amazon, et cetera. I mean, that program could easily be switched just like that to support small businesses, rural businesses, build up rural broadband, to do renewable energy. It's just a matter of choice and education. And, you know, that's what we got to do.
Okay. Well, thank you, Elad, and also Lucas, for coming and speaking today. If there are no other things, we need to turn to some business that we have today. It's time for our annual elections already for officers.
And the board,
Pardon?
and our board members.
Right, board members. So I'm gonna turn some of this over to Susan, if that's okay with you.
Okay. All right. Hi again, I'm Susan Turk, and I tend to be the nominating committee every year. Our board consists of chair, co-chair, secretary, and treasurer, and then 5 at-large board members. Our candidates are, at the moment, Steve and me to remain as co-chairs. Christina Anderson has agreed to serve as treasurer, and Marty Walsh, who has been our treasurer for several years, is going to stand for secretary. As far as the other board members are, we have Don Logue, we have Ron Zager, Al Gerber, and Rick LaMonica, who isn't here today. We know that's 4 people, so we could use one more person to volunteer to sit on the executive board. And what the board basically does is we have Zoom meetings every other month or so, and we plan these meetings. We're responsible for inviting speakers and organizing the group. So if you would like to join us, we could use at least one more volunteer to serve on the board. Any takers? Raise your hand. Hello? All right, well, think about it. Normally we have our elections in January, but if you decide to come on board next month, that's fine too. Right now, I would entertain a motion to adopt the nominating.
Freeze.
You're frozen, Susan.
Brain freeze, brain freeze.
We lost you, Susan.
He'll be back.
You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I can see.
There you are.
Yeah, I was connected. I would like to entertain a motion to adopt nominating slate of officers and board members. Again, that's Steve Reed, Susan Turk for co-chairs, Christina Anderson for treasurer, Marty Walsh for secretary, and then Don Logue, Ron Zager, Al Gerber, and Rick LaMonica for at-large board members. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second the motion.
Second?
Second.
All right. Discussion or anybody would like to volunteer to add their name to the slate to make a ninth board member? All right, well, since no one else is speaking up, shall I call the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, looks like we've got a board for the next year. Thank you very much. Steve, do you want me to give a pep talk about membership renewals?
It's strictly up to you, whatever you want to do.
Sure. Basically, membership dues are $25 a year. We haven't had our treasurer's report today, so I don't know what we have in the bank right now. But we spent a lot of money on supporting candidates' races this fall, and so we really dropped our treasury down quite low. I encourage everyone to re-up their membership dues. You can do it online by using ActBlue or going to our website, and I think there's a donate on the website, or you can send a check to the post office box, which I forget the number
I
of.
put all that in the chat. That should be appear as some of the first items in the chat box under
Great.
mopag.net, and I also give the address as well for checks.
And the perk of being a paid, the perk of being a paid member you will be joined to our online Google group, and you will get information and suggested reading on the Google group, and you'll be able to post to it as well.
So if anybody wants to know the PO box right now, it's 220743 and 63122 is the Kirkwood. So
I think that chat entry, Steve, got lost
Oh, really?
when we got hacked. I don't see it on my chat list.
Oh, all right. Let me repost it then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Marty, that PO box was 220743.
right,
Thank you.
and 63122 is the zip.
Yeah, it's at the bottom, very bottom of what I just posted to the chat. So we're asking you $25 as a normal membership, $15 as a hardship membership. And Marty, do you want to go ahead and give us the treasurer? I guess we're done there, Susan, with membership, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Marty, you want to tell us how much money we got left?
Yeah, after all those contributions, on December 1st, we had $85.23. This month, we picked up dues of $195, and the payments to Act Blue was $5.55. So it leaves us with a total of $274.68.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any announcements they would like to make?
I would just like to say that given what's happened this week with our United States Senator Hawley embarrassing us, there have been a lot of organizations coming out asking for his resignation. I would suggest that MOPAG consider endorsing that. The Board of Aldermen in the city of St. Louis endorsed that, and I believe, well, the League of Women Voters as well. We might as well put our name out there on that issue.
Okay, and what form would this endorsement take? Just a letter released to various news organizations and postings?
Yeah.
Okay.
News organizations and political organizations, you know.
I second the motion.
Right. All in favor, say aye. Do we need discussion? Do we need any further discussion? I guess we should be asked. If not, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. Susan, would you? Yeah, go ahead,
Steve,
Ross.
this is Ross. We also had all of the Republican congressmen, I guess, because Ann Wagner did not participate in the objection to the Electoral College vote, also joined in, the anti-democratic opposition to the Electoral College endorsing Joe Biden's win. And maybe we should include them in the resolution as well. That would be all the Republican congressmen except Ann Wagner in Missouri.
Yeah.
We have any discussion about that, pro and con?
Yeah, I think it's good to keep at least one of them focused on Hawley. If we want to make a second one of this, I wouldn't oppose it, but I think the focus should be on Hawley, otherwise.
I agree.
I don't think there's been enough attention to the fact that we had 147 Republican congressmen who are basically acting in sedition against the United States government and attempting to prevent us from passing the presidency to the legally elected candidate, Joe Biden.
Yeah, I think Ross's point is so well taken, and I don't know. I think one press release or letter is probably, he puts them all in the same cabal terrorist box, and where they all belong. So
if am I stating it correctly if I say that we can have a vote either to amend Susan's original motion to include Ross Hunt's
It's already
amendment?
been passed. You can't amend the one that's been passed. You have to make a new one.
Well, how do you want it? What's the right language, Al? And a second, I mean, I look at it as an amendment to what's already happened, but
Oh, I see what you mean.
regardless, do we want to revise
Yeah, revision.
Susan's original motion to include Ross Hunt's recommendation?
It can be two different motions, but expressed by sending one letter or one press release.
Yeah, it's a revision, right?
Whatever.
that's
It
simplest.
doesn't matter.
Okay. All in favor of that, say aye.
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 Okay. And who's going to do that?
We have a secretary now.
Say what?
Yeah,
We have a secretary, could
Who's a
Christina
very
write something
eloquent
up?
writer, by the way, too.
I'm sorry.
He's also a very eloquent writer.
Right.
Well, yes, but that doesn't mean every action necessarily goes to her. So, all right, well, all right, Christina, you want to take that on? And obviously we'll give you any assist you
Okay,
want.
now,
And Chris,
what are we doing? Are we doing one announcement with everybody or we're doing two separate ones?
I would say one.
My
Okay,
understanding
one,
was we were gonna do one.
all name on top and then list the 147 and then maybe somehow list where they're at and
I would list the
county.
congressman from Missouri who
Hi.
Well,
participated.
yeah, that's what, we're just concentrating on Missouri. I'll give it a shot, so,
Okay.
yeah. And I'll let you guys look it over first and, then you can post it on the Facebook and just say, I'll see what, I'll basically look at somebody else's and base ours on that, so.
Okay, well, this meeting didn't turn out quite like I was hoping. We had a greater number of people sign up this time, including that nutcase, I guess. But we were up to like 25 or 28. And we're still live on Facebook, I believe, right now.
Good.
Democratic Legislative Network, I think most of you are plugged into that, but if you're not, I've provided in the chat the link that you can go to. They have meetings every Monday night, and they're also having training. You might want to sit into one of those and see if that's something that you want to pursue. Again, there's only so much bandwidth each of us has, right? But I would definitely check into that. And it might be something that you want to stay on top of. They are basically, they're gathering they're asking people to reach out to get additional contacts work, and its principal focus is mainly what's going on with the legislature, to bring issues to the fore on what's going on and to solicit support and to have people who have signed up in the DLN to help message out what's going on in the legislature. Diane, is that a fair statement or?
Yeah, it's just a matter of them telling you on Monday what you need to talk about, and then you throw it on Facebook, everywhere you can, in your groups and your pages, and try to get the word out, spread the word. If you use Twitter, then you do it there.
So this triggers a thought, and if it needs to be, another subject item, correct me, Steve, but, I don't know what, if any legislation is being proposed to address all the issues we're talking about. And when I've raised this question with a lot of Democratic leaders in the past, the comment I get back is, well, it'll never get on, on the agenda because of the Republican leadership controls that. And I understand and appreciate that. But, we have to establish some groundwork here that we've at least made an effort that we can maybe advertise or communicate on through other venues that, yes, we have tried to get this legislation to the floor, but it's being ignored so that they can focus on, anti-abortion, issues as opposed to the murder rate. Okay. So that's a comment. I don't know whether anybody who's more involved in party activity has an answer to that.
Don, I made that same comment to Peter Meredith, and he said, we have on every issue, I've mentioned several different issues, CAFOs and others, and he said, on every issue that you mentioned, we have bills filed, and of course they just get buried. And I said, well, you got to tell us about it, because he says they do it. He says they do it, but I think this DLN may be something of an effort to get that word out. They haven't done a good job of getting the word out in the past.
Excellent points. Those are excellent points. Yeah, it's sort of like the Mitch McConnell story, right, here in Missouri.
Exactly.
All these things that get passed at one level or at least filed, and they never see the light of day, and nobody hears about them either.
Yeah.
Or not very much. So
don't even get assigned to committee, so you can't even go in and testify in a committee about it. But we gotta make that more obvious.
I guess that's maybe a good thing to bring up with DLN as well.
Yeah, make it more explicit what they're doing, because the only thing they've asked us to do so far is to distribute Peter Meredith's statement on the Capitol
on the insurrection.
Yeah. So we got to get it more focused on what they're doing, what the legislators are doing. Get that word out.
I also posted in the chat something that I found interesting. There's 5 existing organizations that have been working on the St. Louis economy, and they've all combined into a Greater St. Louis Inc. And that was created on the 1st of January.
Yeah.
And its stated purpose is to lay out a plan, the St. Louis 2030 jobs plan, for what they call inclusive economic growth in the region. And their region of the metropolitan statistical area includes, I think, like 5 or 6 counties. They want to create thousands of new jobs. You can read the plan and comment on it, as I did, at Greater St. Well, I put it in the chat there. It's greaterstlinc.com. And they also had a Zoom meeting on it a couple days ago. And I could comment on it. Susan, do you want to say anything about it?
Well, I haven't participated in any of their meetings, but they are civic progress. And I guess the Chamber of Commerce and a couple of other organizations, they're basically Republican corporate people.
Right. They are well heeled.
They do things like this periodically, and it's always top down. So although they look like they're soliciting our input, when there's a final report, you'll have a hard time finding your input in it. They have an agenda. They, it's not far right Republican, but it's top down politics. So it's very difficult to get them to consider ideas that they haven't already decided to adopt. And I commend you for participating, Steve.
I read their report. It's 93 pages. It's high level. It talks about 5 different strategic areas they want to, that would be, I don't think they use the word core competencies, but that's the idea, core competency of the St. Louis metropolitan region. Certainly their Zoom session was a one-way, top down. They did allow for some comments on their website. So, but I want to know more about it so that I can weigh in and let's see where it goes. Don?
So I did participate in I guess it was Thursday. It was Thursday.
You were there? You couldn't see who the participants were. They had the participant and the chat.
Well, which echoes what Susan was saying.
Right.
And her criticism
They were not enabled.
are well taken. I think it's a step in the right direction, though. Okay. in that they are, and they do mention equity, okay, where the previous reports intentionally left out equity by this group or the former or forms of it. So I think the opportunity is to challenge them to address these issues of equity, and I will be doing that. And Bruce Katz, I have met.
Do you know Bruce Katz, by the way? He's like executive director or whatever within the,
He's a consultant, I think.
yeah, but he's got some title.
And he has a website. He talks about the new localism, which again, and he talks about neighborhoods, which is one of my big things. Okay. So I think, there's some opportunities here, that we want to try to push that organization to address the real equity needs of the St. Louis area. And, but Susan's comments are well taken, but it's a step in the right, it's an opportunity if we choose
Opportunity.
to
Yeah.
embrace.
One of the things they don't talk about at all is in their report are some of the barriers that exist, such as crime and health needs. I noticed that was staring me in the face, the omission of that.
Well, so I posed that question
I
to,
did too.
and Jason Hall responded to me off,
You mean separately?
yes.
Okay.
And so they have a person, and it disappeared before I got her name down, but they have a person who's assigned that area to work on. But the fundamental flaw is in it, and my comment was, what are you going to do about the social and physical infrastructure of these underserved neighborhoods? Because, we keep addressing the employment or the workforce issue without addressing the fact that these people are struggling to raise their children, okay, in traumatized neighborhoods. And I use that language. And the answer so far is totally inadequate. So.
And
Yeah.
the other thing is that, we live in the state of Missouri with something called the Hancock Amendment. We have a legislature that insists on lowering taxes. Our tax level is way below the ceiling set by the Hancock Amendment, but the legislature will never allow us to collect enough revenue to even get to that ceiling. And so in order to fix the problems that we have in our neighborhoods, in order to do something about our infrastructure, we need more revenue. And these business leaders could do something about that if they would primary some of these people that get elected to the legislature. They could fund different political candidates, but they don't. So, we have massive problems, and they're part of the problem.
Well, I think, like Don said, your point's well taken. And I think both Don and I, the reason we're following this and because we want to be able to, I just want to know what's going on. I'm glad, from one aspect, I'm glad that somebody's taking up the mantle to try and work the issues. And of course, they're basing some of their program on what's been done in other cities, such as Indianapolis and other places.
The other thing that you guys may not know about is that Civic Progress used to partner with a group called the Black Leadership Roundtable. And the Black Leadership Roundtable was basically a group of well-educated, successful African-American people. Some of them were the heads of not-for-profits. Some of them worked in the business sector. Some of them were educators. And they were sort of a subcommittee of Civic Progress that Civic Progress went to when they wanted input on equity issues. And over the years, the Black Leadership Roundtable became extremely frustrated with Civic Progress. And so they would divorce themselves from the organization. Then when they thought they got frustrated and wanted to have some input, they would rejoin. Then a couple of years later, they would throw their hands up and divorce themselves again. I think the last time they divorced themselves, they stayed divorced, and I'm not sure if they even function anymore. But you know, within the, you know, for these leaders to say that they're concerned about equity, and then they can't even get them, they can't even develop a respectful relationship with those people in the community who are on a par with them, says a lot. And so, you know, I can tell you, Jim Buford, who was the head of the Urban League before Mike McMillan, was very articulate about his frustrations dealing with the business community, the Civic Progress and the regional business council people in the area. He did not pull punches when he talked about, as he did at public meetings, the difficulties that African-American business leaders and not-for-profit leaders in the area had in dealing with these corporate leaders. Now, I know it's a new generation and it's a new plan and it's a new 93 pages for all of us to read.
Right.
But this has been done before, and the outcomes have never been good. The outcomes have never brought the kind of systemic change that we need in the area. So I commend you guys for engaging, but I can also tell you that there's a lot of frustration, especially in the city. And, you know, like right now we're facing another crisis with schools being closed and the school district looking for more revenue to keep those buildings open. And the business community, these people who have the money are not stepping up and saying, here, let's do something about this. So, you know, really, I'm frustrated. And so that's why I haven't engaged.
You know, and I have been embedded for 5 years up in Ferguson. I'm frustrated as too, but on the other end of the spectrum, and that is that we, you know, and this goes back to a common theme I've been stressing, and that is we are so disorganized at the neighborhood and community level that we don't articulate an appropriate ask, okay? And so these entities with all the money don't know how to spend the money. So post Michael Brown, $16 million was dumped on the Ferguson community, okay? It didn't go to solve any of the problems, okay? And so the real community leadership infrastructure up there is going like, everybody says, well, they gave us all this money and nothing happened, but it really went to a bunch of organizations that weren't Ferguson based, okay? So, I mean, we have a very dysfunctional local capacity, and that's something we have to work on and strengthen so that the voice is heard and the needs are effectively articulated. Mike McMillan is I think, making progress on that, but you know, there's a long way to go. So I agree with Susan, but I say we've got to do a better job on our end, you know, participating and changing those 93 pages so that they articulate a successful strategic plan.
Okay, I have to note with, I don't know if it's amusement or what, but David Humphreys came out this week and said basically, what was I thinking? $6 million I've spent on Josh Hawley. What a waste. Well, yeah. Okay. Yeah, Susan?
Let me report a rumor. We haven't heard much from Rex Sinkfield lately.
No.
Someone told me that he is suffering from Alzheimer's.
Hmm.
And so he may become less of a participant in our problems.
Interesting.
Yeah, our announcement about the legislature, Hawley and the others is that in a bipartisan way, we join Mr. Humphreys in attacking the Republicans, Hawley and the legislators.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
If
Well,
any of you know where Mike Pence is these days, you can probably sell that information on the internet for.
I understood he's in the bomb shelter in West Virginia. I don't know.
The interesting thing is that he was supposed to leave the country. He had a foreign trip set up for the day after, for Thursday until just about the day before the inauguration, but I don't believe he's taken it now.
That's what I had heard as well. Also, Jared Kushner was over in the Middle East on January the 6th, and we've had all sorts of saber rattling essentially over there with the B-52 flights and all.
There's a great article, I forget which media it was, but they talked about how the stink of the Trump family now is so wretched that, you know, nobody wants to do business with them anymore. And that would be appropriate justice. But he was over there looking for capital to buy up